This week on the agenda, the future of multilateralism. As we head into 2026, how are the rules for global cooperation changing? Multilateralism has been one of the key issues of 2025. The 80th anniversary of the United Nations in October focused the world's attention on just how countries can come together to solve global problems. Some countries, like China, place multilateralism at the very heart of their future plans. Others, like the US, appear to be taking a step back from truly worldwide cooperation. So as we move into 2026, what might that all mean? With me now are Ana Palacio, Spain's former Minister for Foreign Affairs; Zhou Bo, author of the book Should the World Fear China; Michael Peters, visiting Distinguished Professor at the School of Education, Tsinghua University; and Dr. Vera Songwe, Chair and Founder of the Liquidity and Sustainability Facility. Thank you, all of you, for coming on the agenda. It's great to have you all back again. Anna, let me start with you, because one thing that happened this year that really focused the world's attention on multilateralism was the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. Would you say that the UN is still the key to multilateralism?
Well, I think that we have had a great year about perceptions and changing perceptions. And frankly, a great year for China that has raised its perception probably in the measure that United States, as you said in the introduction, has retrenched from the multilateral. It's too technical, from soft power in general terms, and within this area of soft power, from activity in the multilateral arena. Does United Nations stay at the center? Well, yes. I mean, institutionally, yes. But the perception is that United Nations is losing energy, is losing oomph, and that there is something that has to be done. And here we have two tendencies: those that want to make a new system and those that want to just revamp or reorganize. And China is about reorganizing, refunding the system as we know it. But just my last, the centerpiece is United States abandonment of soft power. Abandonment of soft power in terms of the participation in multilateral. The multilateral institutions have been created by the United States. It's also this concentration on a very basic understanding of trade. You give me, I give you. Yeah. And then this idea of retrenching from being the global hegemon, but at the same time, just plain victimization. United States is a victim of the allies, in particular, the victim of the Europeans that have been having a free ride on the back of the United States. I think that this is the prevailing perception. Great year for China, a disconcerting and unpredictability about the United States, difficult situation for Europe.
Okay, so China has had a good year, Europe may be having a free ride, and the UN has maybe lost a little bit of its oomph. Zhou Bo, would you agree with that assessment?
Well, not necessarily. I don't believe China is free riding anything. But China has been, a champion of multilateralism, and this is natural because even at the Munich Security Conference this year, the theme is just multipolarization. Of course, multipolarization would lead to multilateralism, right? So that is tells the importance of UN. But the point is, as you have pointed out, that UN is being weakened, largely because of the United States. So sometimes I'm thinking, if China continues to develop economically, could China one day actually lead the UN? Because right now, China's contribution towards the regular budget of UN is just 2% short of that of the United States. If everybody agrees that the UN is still important, And if everybody believes that the United States is retrenching, right?
Yeah.
So why won't China take the lead? Well, I won't say China definitely will take the lead, but this is really the question I'm thinking, because UN is still important. The importance of UN is just to think, without UN, how the world would look like. And very easily, you are going to have the answer. UN is still needed.
Yeah. Vera, is that how you see it too? I mean, do you think that the UN takes enough notice of the global south, or does there need to be reform to give developing nations more of a voice?
Let me start by saying I do not like the word global south. I think we do need to talk about emerging societies. We have friends here from New Zealand. I don't know what part of the south you place yourself in. But to answer your question directly, the answer is yes, the UN is still quite important, will remain important, because we need a centralized institution to help us push global norms. What we are seeing today is a vacuum. There has been a vacuum that has been created not only by the United States, and I want to emphasize this. I think what we have seen is collectively in the UN Security Council, neither the Chinese, nor the Russians, nor the Americans, nor the Europeans have actually been playing, I think, over the last 10 years, a constructive role collectively. And so you have this continuous veto powers, and so no decisions are coming out. And that kind of vacuum, I think, is penalizing everybody, not just some part, whether it's in the north or the south. I think collectively we must agree that if we live in a global world, the problems of climate change do not decide whether the border is in the south or the north, or whether you're the G7 or Mauritius. So I think this is the important thing. We do need a forum where we can discuss global issues. We do need a forum where these issues are discussed, not by, and I think this is what distinguishes maybe a little bit the new Chinese pivot, which is China is saying, we want sovereign equality regardless of nation size. The biggest, most pernicious issue at the UN Security Council today has been, can India have a voice? Can Africa have a voice? Can we have more inclusion in this fora? So the UN is going to stay relevant, but it would only stay relevant for the rest of the world if we have more inclusion, more representation. We in Africa keep talking about Sudan. Yes, finally, we're getting Sudan on the agenda, but not nearly as much. And that is probably for us one of the most important conversations that we would like to have.
So it's interesting you mentioned Sudan there, because there are some other conflict areas around the world which have come up. I'm thinking about when Macron and Xi came up with the joint statement mentioning Ukraine and mentioning Palestine. Michael, China really has been quite focused for much of the year on maintaining that post-World War II order centred around the UN, hasn't it? What do you think that's telling us?
Well, I think the joint statement issued by Macron and President Xi is highly symbolic, and it does illustrate China's commitment to international rule of law, number one. Very keen on that structure underlying the UN, and I think it underlies the 25 sister organizations that are associated with the UN that's embodied in the Charter. That is also, let me say, the heart of multilateralism. And, we're talking about France as one of those countries historically that have been responsible for the development of international law. And I think here we see a perception about China's legitimacy in pursuing this situation. Now, I mean, the other thing to bear in mind here is that this is a process of withdrawal from international organizations by President Trump. And at the same time, this provides, I think, great opportunities for China to display and to demonstrate its leadership of these emerging nations, you say, or global south, the preferred term that Vera used. So there are a lot of opportunities here for China diplomatically to lead both the BRICS and also the more broadly speaking, the emerging nations.
Let's talk a little bit more about those opportunities that you've been talking about there, Michael. Because Anna, in September, the SCO summit in Nanjing, we saw President Xi announcing the Global Governance Initiative, which has become very core to the next 5-year plan. How important was that announcement, and what message do you think that sends to the rest of the world?
It was opportune, timely, because in the end, what we are seeing is this, again, is this withdrawal from soft power in a very broad sense from multilateralism, excuse me, of the United States. And this initiative that completes the 3 previous initiatives by President Xi Jinping is interesting because it brings this idea that rules are necessary, that you have to still get power tamed by rules, and at the same time, seen from a European perspective, which Europe is a creation by rules, so we are absolutely there. And this is something in common that we have today with China, which is important, how we bring back the spirit of rules. But at the same time, what we see is that there is the bringing in certain very classical concept of Chinese civilization. The importance of the group vis-a-vis the importance of the individual, the importance of security vis-a-vis the importance of liberty, the importance of the respect for the precedent, for the I would say for the authority. All this is there as, frankly, it's not new. This was there when the Chinese representative, Dr. Chan, was discussing with Eleanor Roosevelt in 1947 about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So we see the same aspects being brought together by a very different China, in the sense that China is today perceived by everybody as on par and on concerns that go far beyond China.
So I want to bring in Zhou Bo right now, because your book, published this year, Should the World Fear China? I wonder, do you think that China is trying to reshape the global world order in its own image, or is it more subtle than that?
No, it's certainly more subtle than that. Well, if I just compare China to Russia, I would say Russia's attitude probably is to change the world, while China, being a beneficiary of the globalization and existing international system, just wish to improve the international order. Of course, there is always a room for improvement, right? So China's purpose is to actually stand by the international treaties, which China actually has signed, 600 of them, plus, as already pointed out by the other panelists, China has already put forward 4 grand global initiatives. But as I said before, these grand global initiatives are meant to improve the international order, but not to replace them or overthrow it away.
We'll pause there for a moment, but do stay with us. Still to come here on the agenda. What role might emerging entities like BRICS play in the future of multilateralism? Welcome back to the agenda. Let's continue now with our conversation on the future of multilateralism. Still with me are Ana Palacio, Spain's former Minister for Foreign Affairs; Zhou Bo, author of the book Should the World Fear China; Michael Peters, visiting Distinguished Professor at the School of Education, Tsinghua University; and Dr. Vera Songwe, founder of the Liquidity and Sustainability Facility. Vera, at the G20 summit in South Africa, a summit which, of course, Donald Trump did not attend. Chinese Premier Li Qiang laid out some pretty practical proposals on things like debt and trade, investment development, especially in the global south. What do you make of this new approach to multilateralism?
I think it's quite clear. I mean, we've had the conversation on the Global Governance Initiative, and one of the important tenets of the Global Governance Initiative was essentially maintaining the international rule of law. Yeah. And in that, I think an important thing that China has done, which in my view demonstrates a certain degree of vulnerability, but also a certain degree of making sure that it maintains, because in some sense what we have today is unilateralism is leading to conflict. And China, I think, also feels the need and the pressure to be protected by international law, lest it gets embroiled in conflict. And I believe that it is as a result of that it has also given away some of the privileges that it had on the WTO. Now at the G20, I think what we are seeing in terms of economic growth, which was the theme of the G20 was inclusion, sustainability, and equity, is essentially China and the United States taking two very different approaches, right? The Chinese had done, and we mentioned already the Belt and Road Initiative, but they're going one step further now to say, we're going to do processing, we're going to start adding value at source. Whereas the Americans that are coming in new are saying, we're going to do sort of what we, I think, accused China of doing 20 years ago, which was just mineral extraction. So if you look at the U.S. national security strategy, it is about, let's go get the minerals, let's find them where they are. It's sort of industrial security as opposed to strategic alliances and building, a different global economic environment. For the developing world, for Africa in particular, we need jobs. And so I think that message seems to be coming out a little bit more from the G20, from the Chinese side, which is now moving towards manufacturing, green digital tech on the continent. We're seeing this happening across the continent with, sharing of technology and production happening, a lot more onshoring processing happening on the continent. I think this kind of partnership is a new partnership for China, which is in its new 5-year development plan.
Ana, earlier you talked about the US being more entrenched, and in the new US national security strategy, it really does seem to be very America first. I mean, do you think that signals a shift away from US global dominance? The tone towards the rest of the world certainly seems to have altered.
Your question is the question. But when you read the national strategy, you realize that it's full of contradiction. One of the major contradictions at the beginning of the strategy is say that pursuing a global dominance by previous administrations was a big mistake. But then when you read the strategy in full, you see that the United States wants to remain the hegemon in technology, the biggest security, military power. So there is this contradiction. I think that America first, in a way, is the basis of any foreign policy. The first thing that you have to do, and China does, and everybody does, is to care for your interest, for the interest of the country. Now, what is in this America first is this kind of contradiction, and in many cases, disregard. In the first place, disregard for the value of alliances.
It's interesting you talk about this disregard for alliances, and I'd like to dig into that a little bit deeper with you, Michael. I wonder if you think there's sort of a growing ambivalence or even a lack of respect of the US to institutions like the European Union, other multipolar groups. What do you think?
I definitely agree with that position. If you read the national security strategy, it is very derisive about Europe, talking about the Eurasia of European civilization. And that's why the joint statement by President Xi and President Macron was so symbolically important, because both of them holding steadfastly to international rule of law and to and to multilateralism of the UN system. But remember, I think we have to remember here, with the withdrawal of the United States from international organizations, the World Trade Organization, as an example, over tariffs, and of other organizations, World Health Organization, and so on, that we face a world, let me say, a system, UN system, without full participation of the United States. Now, that does provide opportunity for China to take on a full diplomatic role here, as they have been doing, and I think also for them to champion the BRICS countries and Global South, who, when you look at the establishment of the United Nations in 1945, it referred to a different political reality after the Second World War. Well, it's so different now. We're looking at BRICS countries and Global South, which have a large proportion of the world's population, that has a huge proportion, 40% world GDP, 50%, let's say, foreign direct investment. So there are good reasons to look to the reform of the organisation, and this will not encourage the US to continue its full participation in that organisation. If anything, that kind of reform, which is required to accommodate the changes that have taken place in the last 80 years, will only emphasise America First policies.
Zhou Bo, do you think that the US's latest strategy might force the rest of the world into making a choice between supporting the US approach to foreign affairs or a more multipolar, dare I say it, Chinese way of seeing the world?
Well, I think what is uniting the world is that no countries want to pick sides, with either China or the United States. As mentioned before, the United States itself actually is changing because it is tired. It is, giving up its role as world policeman. But as Anna has also pointed out, there is a dilemma in the Americans' national strategy. So therefore, we have to wait and see. But I believe what is interesting about China is wearing too many hats, and each one of them is true. For example, China argues it is a developing country, right? But China also said it is a natural member of the Global South. China never mentioned that it won't become a Global South leader whatsoever. But China is also described, even by French President Macron, as a superpower. When he talked about this, I was at Munich, I was at the Shangri-La Dialogue. I heard this. So China is a magician in people's eyes. The magician can actually take out, a rabbit or some other things immediately from his hat. So therefore, when it comes to China, I think China is what China is. What China wants is to realize the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. But in doing so, because of China's connectivity with the rest of the world, how it would, do anything to fulfill its dream matters tremendously to the rest of the world. And China is a global power, and a global power would show a greater responsibility. So therefore, how China could actually contribute to world peace, to make the world less dangerous in its own way, really matters. Because I believe China does have some unique tools that are different from American practice to make this world less dangerous, if not better.
Vera, I wonder if that's how you see it, if you think that developing nations are going to be forced into making a choice, or if there's maybe a middle way, a middle path here, perhaps through the growth of newer groups like BRICS.
I think developing nations, as Anna said and somebody else said, are already making choices. They're making choices for their citizens. They're making choices for their populations. They're making choices for growth. They're making choices for a better future. And those choices essentially will reflect on their trade patterns, will reflect on their affinities. I think that, President Xi talks about equal and orderly multipolarity. This is what developing nations want to do. They want to be able to access, the pristine green technology that is coming out of China, but at the same time, the high-end technology that is coming out of the United States and the DPI technology coming out of India. So essentially, they want to be able to access all of this at the same time and progress. So it's not a question of choices. And that's why we go back to the multilateral order. If I take Africa, for example, one of our biggest tension points is about debt, transparency, and capital markets, right? And there you have that conversation with China, with US and European private sector capital markets, where we would like better transparency in these markets. We would like better transparency in the Chinese debt market, just as much as we would like better transparency in the European and American debt markets. I think there are areas where and this is why multilateralism becomes important in these kinds of conversations, which are important for growth and development of the emerging markets. I think there clearly is, again, as is in the Global Governance Initiative of China, an importance for an international rule of law that delivers transparency, that delivers equitable treatment of countries and citizens. So it's not about, again, what we pick, but it's about the rule of law. It's about a couple of norms that we must continue to respect so that, there is a global good. And these norms and rules actually become important. We see the United States not leaving the WTO because on the IT side, for their Beautiful Seven or Magnificent Seven, they need WTO rules to make sure that, their big companies are protected. At the same time, China needs WTO to be able to access world markets. So I think what we are being able to see is there's still some points of consensus.
Michael, what would you like to see happen in 2026 to increase true cooperation around the world?
For 2026, I do have aspirations and hope that the United Nations system is reformed to reflect the current political realities, particularly of the global south, of the BRICS countries that now have, as we understand, represent the shift in the economic gravity of the world from the west to the east. And we can see this as a future that is unfolding for us. So I think there are some very big concerns here. Yeah. And, I haven't mentioned security. I haven't mentioned border disputes. But, the production of global public goods, which I think is a framework that the United Nations has sensibly endorsed, is also an area that China has a great contribution to give, especially through its infrastructuralist kind of solution.
Michael Peters, Vera, Songwe, Ana Palacio and Zhou Bo, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out The Agenda Show on TikTok.
Coming up on a future agenda, after a diplomatically busy 2025, what might 2026 hold for relations between China and Europe? But for now, from me, Juliet Mann, and from all the Agenda team here in London, goodbye.